The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy, never-normal shift going on all around us. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of people, business, and technology. Here is your host, Ira Wolf.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show. Thank you for being part of Googleization Nation. I'm Ira Wolf. If you think this is just another podcast, think again. This is the voice of the most important conversations on the future of work confronting business, leaders, and people today. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of business, technology, and people. Well, this is the first live show of our 7th season. It's hard to believe. 2018 is when we started. Living up to our Googleization theme of adapting at the speed of change, you'll probably notice a few changes of our own. First of all, Jason Cochran, my co-host and friend for the last 2.5 years, is not by my virtual side. Jason was offered an opportunity to do what he and I talk about every week for the last 3 years, or actually last 6 years. He left for an opportunity to help businesses implement creating a better employee experience and life for all workers. So we wish the best for Jason, and I'm sure he'll be back at some point. Unfortunately, his schedule didn't permit the opportunity to do it now, so I'll be hosting solo. But change always opens up new opportunities, and not being one to hesitate to walk through those doors, sometimes burst through those doors, I decided to change up the format a bit. Instead of 2 hosts interviewing 1 guest, we're going to have 1 guest or 1 host interviewing 2 guests on many of the shows. And this week we have an all-star duo featuring Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization alumni, Gad Levanon. I think this is his 3rd, maybe his 4th time. Gad is the chief economist at Burning Glass Institute, and Dr. Christopher Borick, director of the Institute of Public Opinion at Muhlenberg College. I can't think of 2 better people to explore the impacts of AI, a booming economy, presidential election, everything that's going on. And certainly the election is shaping up to be controversial and one of the most critical ones in the history of the U.S. So you're going to want to stay right where you are. You might also have noticed that our virtual stage changed a bit. When I started Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization back in 2018, my co-host with Keith Pagna, our first home was for W4CY Radio. We were just doing audio at the time. Well, we took a break for about 3 years, but now we came back as they grew and they entered the video world, and we've been doing video for a while. So in addition to broadcasting live on our usual platforms like LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, we're now live on W4CY and Talk4 TV. We're reaching a potential audience of almost 2 million people through all the platforms that we're on. So the video replays will continue to be available on all the usual platforms, such as Roku, Apple, Spotify, or wherever and however you listen to podcasts. To make it easy to watch each week on W4CY on your mobile devices, simply download the W4CY app on whichever platform you're using, or you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, W4CY's or mine at Ira Wolf, and you will get notified when we go live. Before we get to this week's guests, it's time for the perfect labor story. This is the segment I get to bring to your attention a disruptive, surprising, or worrisome trend that I believe you should know. Well, according to PwC's 27th Annual Global CEO Survey, released just about 3 weeks ago, nearly 45% of global CEOs believe their companies would no longer be viable in 10 years if they continued on their current path. Just a few years ago, just 1 year ago, it was only 40%. So there's a 10% increase in just 1 year that they don't think that the pace of change is going to allow them to be economically viable again a decade from now. The number is even more discouraging for companies generating revenues of under $100 million. I believe it was over 55%. Don't believe they'll be around. So, and a few months earlier, McKinsey released its State of Organizations report, and the forecast wasn't much better, especially for managers who are waiting for change to slow down for them to catch up. Only 5%, that's correct, 5 single digits of respondents said their organizations have the capabilities that they need. So glad we've got these two experts on to help us figure that out, what they need to do. McKinsey calls it a capability chasm, and a chasm it is. Part of the reason might be because leadership feels that between 20 and 30% of critical roles in their organizations aren't filled by the appropriate people. And finally, more than 1/3 of leaders listed managing immediate crisis or getting the same work done with fewer resources is a top priority. That means deploying resources, including people, where they matter the most, efficiently and quickly. That requires adaptability, what you've heard me talk about for the last 4 years as high IQ, high AQ. But studies show that only 1 out of 4 employees have high AQ, high enough to keep up with the accelerating pace of change we're experiencing. And that, Googleization Nation, is why I've been warning about the perfect labor storm for the last 25 years. Well, it's now time for many of those companies to pay the piper who didn't respond, which leads me into why we're here today. Gad Levanon is chief economist of the Burning Glass Institute. He previously was with the Conference Board, where I met him, where he was the founder of the Labor Market Institute. His research focuses on trends in the U.S. and global labor markets, the U.S. economy, and their impact on employers. Gad's one of my favorite connections on LinkedIn. I encourage you to connect with him because almost every day, if not more than once a day, Gad offers a steady diet of data-driven stats and trends about jobs, labor, and the economy that are just mind-blowing. He does magic with these numbers. Dr. Christopher Borick is a professor of political science and director of the Muhlenberg College Institute of Public Opinion. In his career, he's conducted over 300 national, state, and regional public opinion surveys, and he provided analysis for the BBC, NPR, CBS News, CNN, NBC Nightly News, and many others. As a director of the Institute, Chris is a pretty popular guy, as you can imagine these days, during the election. So I'm really pleased he's agreed to join us. Welcome, Gad and Chris.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Ira. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. And I like that your lead-in included lots of survey data. It made me feel at home.
Yeah, and Gad, a numbers guy. We got numbers people here, so stay tuned. So again, I know you both got tons of things on your plates. I really appreciate you being here. Plus, I enjoy talking to both of you. Let's start out this way. We've got a whole bunch of questions. We're the title of the show. It's always difficult to come up with something that summarizes it, but it's sort of, the policy, public opinion, and business, are they ships passing in the night? And sometimes it absolutely it is that way. Just down the hall from you, Chris, yesterday I was teaching in the innovation and entrepreneurship class, and they showed the discrepancy between the pace of change, how different segments keep up. And, public policy seems to be almost a flat line, where technology is almost this hockey stick. It's almost a vertical line going up at the pace of, how quickly things are changing. And then, individuals in business somewhere fall, in between. So lots to talk about. So I only want to get into the election a little bit, but let's just start out easy. We're 6 weeks into 2024. What's the most surprising thing you've seen or experienced so far this year? Or, what's the biggest takeaway you have, what you've seen so far this year?
Sure.
Either one. I'll let it.
Go ahead, Gad.
Happy to go. Well, it's not a huge surprise, but I think most of the indicators that came so far this year are suggesting that the U.S. economy is growing even faster than expected. There's no sign of recession, and very rapid and strong growth. The U.S. is outpacing most other advanced economies for quite a while now. So that's kind of strong 2024, and potentially problems for the Fed in their quest to lower interest rates.
Yeah, we'll come back to that because I'm curious why that's going. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that. Why you think that was why that's going to be a problem? It seems that's everybody else is sort of excited and looking forward to it. So, Chris, sorry, didn't want to interrupt you there.
No, Ira, and I love where Gad. I was kind of headed in the same direction. I mean, the persistence of the positive macroeconomic news as we've entered 2024 is pretty staggering, right? And as we move into an election year, and of course, political economy, the relationship between economics and politics is very much on my mind as we move forward. To simplify a very incredibly complex political and economic environment, we've traditionally seen positive macroeconomic indicators deliver success to incumbent presidents trying to reach a second term. We know Joe Biden's trying to do that right now. The big question is does a history of that relationship still hold in 2024 in this changed world that you talk about so often? Will history once again establish that, I could model this? Good economic indicators like the ones Gad just mentioned, will they hold in terms of actually being a powerful force for re-election, or have we moved into something different, which a lot of people are asking me about? So that's kind of takeaways as the start of the year.
Yeah. So sticking with the economy a little bit, let's talk about a year ago. Gad, you were on a couple times, and we were everyone, and I don't know if this was included you, but we also work with the Odeon Capital Group, and they're on quarterly, and we talk about the prediction was, or the most, I won't say the choice, the options were soft landing or recession. Okay, here we are a year later, and we've got a booming GDP. We've got an incredibly the stock market is going crazy. Labor numbers just the other day came out to 340,000 new jobs. That doesn't seem like we're talking soft landing or recession anymore. And which goes back to what you were talking about, Chris, with the economy. I mean, that should just be a lock for Biden. And again, we don't want to go into, we're not political choices, we're just talking about this, but that should, in history, be a lock for that, no brainer, and it's not. Gad, I guess with all the numbers and all the forecasting and all the trends and we talk about this being in completely VUCA time, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, how did so many people get it wrong?
I think the U.S. consumer, I would say that's part of you should never underestimate the willingness of the U.S. consumer to consume. That was probably just kept on consuming and seems to be continuing to consume and growing consumption significantly. I do think that one of the positive surprises that inflation came down faster than most expected, faster than I expected. I still wouldn't celebrate yet. I think it's not clear that we are safely at around 2%, which is the Fed's target for inflation. and especially with such a strong employment growth, as you mentioned, the labor market is likely to remain tight, and wage growth is also still well above pre-pandemic levels. Um, so that could also threaten the inflation target.
Yeah. So, there was a question that just flew out of my head there, Gad. So, as we talk about the labor markets, and you just did a really nice piece talking about the regional differences as well. So again, when we talk about, and Chris, this certainly falls in your world with public opinion, and I know you've done a lot of work in the state of Pennsylvania with surveys. We can talk about something that you just released back about 6 weeks ago, maybe or so, the discrepancies. But it's going back to James Carville's description of Pennsylvania. We had Philadelphia, Ohio, or Philadelphia, the Midwest, and Kentucky. We're like the three regions of Pennsylvania. And here we are, so there's wide differences even within our state, discrepancies. But Gad, you've just published some data on the huge discrepancies regionally with people that are thriving, but some are being left behind. And it's not only within regions, it's within a lot of demographics.
Yeah, I think, when you ask people how you feel about the economy, it's not just about kind of the business cycles, whether the overall economy is growing and whether unemployment rate is high or low. It's kind of when they answer this question, they think long term. And there are several areas in this country that are kind of in a constant decline relative to other parts of the country. And I would say the Midwest is especially coming to mind. It used to be a region that was richer than the average, and now it is gradually declining, and it's now well below the average state in the country. So there is massive migration out of those areas. So if you live there, even if you have a job and you're personally doing well, you're definitely impacted by the surroundings, by communities being depleted, by missing out on tech, for example. Tech is especially strong in the West, but there is also in other rising in other places. But the Midwest is kind of it skipped the Midwest for the most part. So I think there are very important areas, especially areas that were Republicans, I would say, battleground states, where they are significantly feeling more left behind than they used to, which could have important implications for the elections.
Yeah, I mean, that seems a little odd because I know, like Arizona is, certainly one of those states. Yet, that Intel has been there for years, and now they're talking about building, a lot of other, facilities there as well. Texas, is there. I'm not sure that's a battle. I mean, it is an important state, but I'm not sure that's a battleground state. You can certainly see that in the Wisconsins, but Pennsylvania's really, there's a lot of activity going on, certainly with Pittsburgh, sort of led with Carnegie Mellon, University of Pittsburgh, the healthcare system out there, is led the state for many years. And then Philadelphia certainly became a lot more active, State College. So we have tech. I mean, there's a lot there, which really go ahead, Gad. Looks like you were going to.
I was just saying, like, some people in Pennsylvania would not view themselves as the Midwest. But it
yeah, just
still,
Philadelphia views Pittsburgh as the Midwest.
But no, but Pennsylvania certainly became a battleground state, and it was safely Democrat, I would say, during the Obama years and before. So I think that's a very interesting one. I think, and probably Chris knows much more about it than I do, but I think the economic decline of the Midwest made some of the states there, especially Michigan, Wisconsin, that were more safely Democrat, they became battleground states, and areas like Ohio that used to be a battleground state now is safely Republican. So that had major implications for the political system.
Yeah, and my wife and I grew up in the coal regions of Pennsylvania, eastern coal regions, and it's shocking going back and looking at the hometown politics that it was staunch Democrat. I mean, you're talking coal miners, you're talking unions, you're talking really blue collar jobs. And so it for when we grew up and through most of the following decades, it was staunchly, I won't say liberal, but it was certainly Democrat. And now communities like Hazelton, Luzerne County are, pretty outspoken, almost ultra right, super conservative, huge shifts within that. So even a microcosm of where the country is, that's a good example. And I know we've got listeners from around the world, so some of these communities don't make sense, for people. Chris, did you have something to say?
No, just it's really fascinating in the way you, Ira and Gad framed it. And I too am, I grew up just outside of Scranton, and all, that experience, one of the most democratic places in the country that's seen a shift. And ironically, it's where the president's from, right? It's his hometown. Right. Deep, democratic roots that he has began there within that community. But as Gad was talking about, his description, all of this is a microcosm of Pennsylvania. All the projections, you started, Ira, with projections over the next decade. Pennsylvania's Rural Center released some projections for this decade, in the next 20 years, actually, in terms of Pennsylvania population and the absolute draining of rural counties in the state in terms of population projections, at the same time of growth in the regions that we might describe the eastern portion, the east coast part of the state, the southeast, including the Lehigh Valley. So we all this, the backdrop of those issues that Gad was describing in terms of economic displacement, disappointment, worry about the future, kind of this opinion of decline, is part of many of the experiences in Pennsylvania, but also quite distinct from what we'd see in the growth areas of the state. In the growth areas, in real numbers, the place growing the fastest over the last decade is the city of Philadelphia. In real numbers, percentage-wise, you see some of the collar counties and places up here in the Lehigh Valley. What's so important about that, viewers or listeners might say, well, yeah, okay, that's a nice story for Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania happens to be the premier swing state in the presidential election. It's the biggest prize up for grabs, right? And all of those dimensions that we have talked about are weighing on the choices. And I talked before about public opinion and how people view the future, right? How they view the economy. Things that Gad mentioned, right? And there is this historic disconnect between macroeconomic indicators and public confidence and public views on the direction of the economy, and that's against the backdrop of an election, and it's a backdrop in a place like Pennsylvania, which really complicates the dynamic. As I said before, if I was a modeler and I'd go back in history and say, well, given all the macroeconomic indicators and their predictor of electoral fortunes, this one's done, right? And assuming we're on the same trajectory, I'll take Gad's point, maybe you don't want to be overly optimistic, right? Things could still affect this year, but let's assume it's kind of headed the way it is. It just doesn't simply work in a world right now that I think has some disrupted dynamics going on.
I would say, I think another interesting thing that happens and contributed to the shift in the Midwest and other swing states is that I would say during the Obama years, it wasn't clear which party is the party of the elites and which party is the party of the people. Like Mitt Romney and McCain, they were as elite, if not more, than Obama. But I think now there is much more clear alignment of like the elite with the Democrats and the people, I would say let's say the blue collar people with the Republicans, and that I think contributed to this shift, especially in the Midwest.
Let's try to pull this back a little bit, I guess, is what are the consequences of all this? Where do we go? Since this is about the future of work, what does this look like 5 or 10 years from now? And again, part of what we talk about a lot here is jobs and labor in the labor market. So it's a little bit different. One of the stats that I've been throwing out for quite a while, and some of the research probably came from Gad as well. Is that if you look at the trends going back when the baby boomers entered the market, the largest generation ever, we were creating 2.5 million. It wasn't new jobs, but there was 2.5 million new people, potential workers, coming into the workforce every year. So for 20 years, that was, and then we hit Gen X, which was about half the size of that. So just for reference, Gen X sort of born 1965, 1980-ish, give that period of time. But it was about half the size of the boomers, but the economy slowed. It was the 80s. So when they started to enter the workforce, it wasn't that impactful. And we didn't notice that. Plus, the baby boomers were still aging, and there was still this wave of baby boomers. So we dropped from about 2.5 million new potential bodies, new workers, plus immigration. That was just births that we had. And then it escalated again with the millennials, and we're back to about 2.5 million potential workers. With our birth rate and limited immigration, we're down, and I know some of the stats said we're down to under 500,000 new potential workers, while the baby boomers are retiring, slowing down, aging, dying, and the young generation that's coming in has a whole different outlook on work. So when we talk about tight labor markets, I'm not seeing how that changes. So going to the future, I'd like to hear your commentary on that. And what's and then when we come back after the break, we'll weave in the elephant in the room, which is AI. We talk about, people are saying, I need work, we need different work, we need more work, we need higher wages. And now we got, and Gad and I are talking about this tight labor market. It's like, okay, so why isn't all this possible? It should be the other way around. Employers should be screaming, we need workers. So a lot of confusion. So I'll let you comment on that, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll dig into AI for a little bit. Okay. Chris, do you want to lead off?
You know what? I think Gad probably could offer much more on the.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Okay. Good.
But go ahead. Gad.
No, please, Chris. Please finish. Yeah.
No, the one thing I will say is, you laid it out so well. You framed it, Ira, as a political pollster might say, for a way that we could think about, and I'm obviously thinking through a political lens, the labor market, and how this affects our political views, our desires, our views on what the system should do. And those are big ticket items that we don't have time right now, maybe after the break. But certainly, right, you do hear, and looking at polls of businesses about the labor market, those fears, right? And also the desire for policies that might allow that to happen. And certainly immigration is a gigantic issue in this election cycle, in how it is looked and how it's viewed. And you see tons of nuance, right? Traditionally businesses, how they might view immigration and versus some other kind of cultural aspects of it. And it is a complex dynamic that's going to really play out over the next decade. But Gad, please.
I just, since we're talking about immigration, I'll just say that by not solving the border crisis, in fact, we have the most influential immigration policy in many years. I think it's underreported how many new immigrants joined the labor force in the last 2-3 years. And there are all those asylum seekers that come to the border and they are let in and they are released, and in a few months they have a right to work. I'm not saying if it's good or bad, I'm just describing the labor market impact. And after a while they do start working, and I'm sure many of the illegal immigrants are also starting to work at some point. So we had a massive inflow, which I think part of the reason why the labor market loosened a little, especially labor market for kind of less skilled workers, really loosened in the last year or two. And an underreported factor is the massive immigration that occurred during that time. So and doesn't seem that it's going to change much anytime soon. With the failure to reach an immigration deal. That's an important, not, I would say, not a game changer, but a game mini changer.
It's the pre-game show, right? So, want to thank everybody for listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We got a lot more to go. Well, we have some more to go, but we're going to take a quick break here. I want to thank Gad Levanon and Chris Borick for joining us. We've been a great conversation. When we come back, we're going to really dig in a little bit more with AI, because ChatGPT came out, with just a small fraction of everything that's going on in AI. But the economy is just going crazy. I mean, there's, if you're in if you were in the right semiconductor stocks, you've made 600% money since the beginning of the year. We're only 5 weeks into it. And crazy gains there. So is this going to be a bust? But AI is certainly not going away. Toothpaste out of the tube. Bad news for folks that think we got to slow it down, regulate it, control it. Public policy, because of its slow pace, just missed the boat. And we're still trying to figure out social media, and that's been around for 20 years. Having congressional hearings on what to do about social media. So we've got a lot. Unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left when we come back for the break. So I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to go to our commercial. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Are your employees feeling stuck and just showing up for a paycheck? Is your workforce working harder to get back to normal than adapting to the future? It's time to help them break their addiction to certainty and develop a growth mindset. Developed by one of the world's top-rated future of work thought leaders, AQ Plus Mindset is a powerful tool to help your employees embrace change, adapt faster, and grow on the job. Conveniently delivered to any smartphone or laptop and easy to digest 5 to 10 minute lessons. Managers can sit back and watch employee attitude shift towards growth and innovation in just 30 days. Are you ready to help your employees thrive in this ever-changing, never-normal world? Encourage them to show more grit, resilience, adaptability, and unlock their potential? The journey to a growth-filled future starts with a growth mindset. Visit aqplusmindset.com or call 484-373-4300.
Everyone, welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We've got Gad Levanon, Chief Economist at Burning Glass Institute, Chris Borick, who's Director of Public Opinion. I keep saying public policy, but it's Director of the Institute of Public Opinion at Muhlenberg College. When we left off, we're talking about the labor markets. So, but we're also I want to integrate AI. I mean, it's more than the elephant in the room. It's a whole family of elephants that are in the room. We knew it was coming, right? It's right before the pandemic, and we've had this pandemic thrown into this mix of everything. But right before the pandemic, just a few months before, at the Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce, we had a Future of Work Summit. It was Future of Work 2030, and I gave the keynote there. And I talked about what things were going to look like in 2030, and then bam, 6 months later, here we are. So we sort of missed we missed our projection by a decade, but we're living within that. I think we missed the projection on the AI. We thought this was going to be a kind of a linear, gradual rollout, and ChatGPT shows up, and all of a sudden it blows up. It's not only in consumers' hands, but it seems like every industry, every business, probably combined with the labor market. So let's talk a little bit about Gad, maybe the impact that that we should expect to see with AI on the labor markets. Chris, certainly on the election, but on the future, on the future as well, future of work, what your take is on that. So let's start with Gad. Where are you seeing the impact? I mean, is the fear of we're going to wipe out? I mean, I don't see it that way, but the dystopian view is it's going to eliminate all these jobs. It's going to change jobs, but or are we going to go through the traditional outcome where there's just millions of new jobs?
Well, so in the past 10, 20 years, quietly but surely, a lot of like millions of clerical and office support jobs were eliminated, and it didn't make the news that much.
Yeah,
but
bank tellers, and it was like ATMs are going to get rid of all the bank teller jobs.
Well, it didn't at the beginning, but eventually now we have half of the number of bank tellers that we used to. So I think what will happen is a continuation of that, perhaps a little faster, and perhaps more importantly, it won't be just clerical and office support. It will move up to the white collar professionals, and we will see that. But it's not necessarily going to happen through massive layoffs. Even if a company wants to reduce its workforce in a certain role, they don't need to fire a lot of people immediately. They can just stop hiring for those roles and let attrition do its job. And after a while, you'll see a significant reduction. I think we will see a lot of that. I do believe that it's a big deal, that the technological improvement here is real, and eventually there will be much fewer jobs in many occupations that are highly exposed to AI. But go ahead.
I was going to say, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think one of the things that's there is that one of the stats is that 2/3 of all jobs will be 1/3 automated or changed, requiring 2/3 of, and that just doesn't include. I mean, at one time when we talked about automation, it was a blue collar, it was a line worker, and now we're talking about, we're talking everything from doctors, attorneys, accountants, professors. I mean, every industry is going to be affected, and it doesn't mean it's going to eliminate those jobs, but it's going to change those jobs. Everybody's going to have to learn. It doesn't mean that everybody can work 2/3 of the time. I know that's the abundance theory and the singularity theory that, we'll only have to work 20 hours a week and everybody will be able to thrive. The reality is that we're still going to have these 40 and 50-hour weeks that we all put in to get paid. But what we do is going to change, and how we get our work done is going to get changed. So that to me is the scariest part of creating this class of people who just says, I'm too old to learn how to do this, or they don't have an opportunity to learn, some of these skills. Chris, where is AI affecting your world other than misinformation?
so many, and in the misinformation, one of the big components, right? And it is so challenging. And I'm certainly not the expert that both of you are in terms of labor markets, but thinking it from in my field, public opinion research, enormous when we're at our conferences, amount of attention paid to AI and how that either fits in as a benefit, a complement to the work, a substitute for the work, all the things that we could think about. And then, as you know, Ira, in the education field, right? As you mentioned, professors among the occupations, not only, how we embrace AI within our pedagogy or try to limit AI within our pedagogy, but also in what we actually do, the performance. So I think the big challenge is going to be for everyone across industries, including the ones that I'm part of, is to identify the human value added components, right? What will AI do? What will humans? What value do they add specifically that AI can't capture, and how do we weave those things together? So it's a incredibly dynamic kind of moment, right, for everything. And I certainly don't have a ton of answers. In the electoral process, in the political area, which I spend my time thinking about, certainly AI is already, we've seen it enter into campaigns. and the way that people are worried about the most nefarious ways, right, with AI generated messaging and calls, and the Biden in New Hampshire already. We've seen that as an example. That there'll just be more of that.
I guess the good news is it means we're creating jobs for people, either creating it or uncovering it or protecting it.
And that is, you're right. And it's not trivial, right, on both sides, and who it replaces, but it is new opportunities and new regulatory. And from my perspective, the thing that I'm really fascinated, and I think the challenge is the regulatory structures, infrastructure to deal with this, right? And how we will deal with that on an electoral process. Imagine elections, right, where they might be majorly affected. And this is not kind of scare tactics, but some on election day, a really successful AI generated campaign that dissuades voters from showing up for various reasons, right? That's believable, and how we might deal with that through our laws that are simply not designed for that. So major challenges ahead. I'm optimistic they could be addressed. Politics moves glacially compared to all the other things that you folks are studying and looking at. But ultimately, it can find ways to at least buffer some of the most challenging aspects of it.
I have a potential theory. I'm curious what you think about that, Chris. So, in the past, the people who were kind of left behind were mostly people without a college degree, because their jobs were most impacted. I wonder if with the generative AI, the group of the left behind will grow, and a few of the college grads will join them, because now they will be left behind. Their jobs will be significantly impacted. So kind of the pool of the people who are left behind is going to become larger and larger.
At a different demographic, right? I mean, that's fascinating. We've seen the shift kind of, as we talked about earlier in the show, of the populist ascension in the Trump era and the Republican Party, right? And the push to the Democratic Party of higher educated, wealthier elites, if you will, away from the Republican Party. So you see these shifts going on. And often historically, we've seen labor markets and labor challenges reorientate political alliances, right, over time, these realignments that we have. And absolutely, I mean, if you see a major disruption in terms of economics driven by AI among that cohort that we're talking about of higher educated professionals, you could I'm going to use the word strange bedfellows, but you can create some really kind of aligned groups politically that might have some transformative properties within the electoral process.
Unfortunately, we are coming up to the end of the show, because we can go on. I've got at least 9 more questions here, but so hopefully we'll be able to carve some time out and get you guys back, during the course of the year and get some progress on that. But there's 2 things I'd like to do our lightning round. I want to give you guys an opportunity how people can reach out to you as well. So let's do those together, and in the sake of time. So Chris, my question for you is, in our lightning round, is something get a little bit more personal about you. What's something that people often get wrong about you, and how can they reach you?
One is that I follow politics nonstop, right? That I go home.
Well, we know that about you.
Yeah, and all I do is watch every show, and I know every bit of information. So I'm hopefully once I leave, I spend more time running or watching Philly sports than I do just simply watching cable news. And you can get it. I'm very easily reached. You can reach me right through the Institute of Public Opinions, easily found with a simple search. And I try to be as responsive as possible. So I'm hopefully very easily reached.
I'm sure you'll be quite.
I could have been more lightning with that.
You'll be quite busy this year, so we'll give you a little leeway in getting back to us. We will also put the links. I'll put a few links into the show notes. Gad. Same thing. What's something people that often get wrong about you?
I don't know what people think about me, so I don't know if they get it wrong or right. I guess I am not a typical economist in my nature and behavior, so that's maybe one thing that people have, like this image of economists. How to reach me? I'm, as you mentioned earlier, I'm very active on LinkedIn. And I work for a relatively new organization, the Burning Glass Institute, and I encourage everyone to check us out and look at what we're doing on our website. So maybe we can put that later on as well.
Yeah, definitely. You guys do some incredible work, and I highly recommend connecting with Gad up on LinkedIn, and he's kind of active. I mean, you're always interacting with everybody, and there's some super smart people up there, especially when we're talking about the labor markets. And sometimes it gets a little, economic-y geeky, but yeah. But yeah, I would put you in the category the stereotypical, although you're not an accountant, but the extroverted accountants, the extroverted economist, right? Yeah. So again, I appreciate both of you taking time out of your busy schedules, crazy parts of the year. So many other things to be able to chat about, and hopefully that will be able to get you back on. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the show today. The first next week, this month we've got some great guests, and again on the new format. Next week we have someone called, her name's Jody Padar. She is really looking at what we're going to be talking about what accounting is going to look like in the future of work. So we got Bill Keller, who is he has a global staffing firm, and he works with almost exclusively with with businesses, helping them with their accounting. And then Jody is really almost a futurist in that regard about the accounting, but many of the trends there will fall that over. Following week, we got our two favorite neuroscientists back, or two of our neuroscientists back, and what the effect is going to of work and people is going to be on that. So we got Paul Zach and Zach Mercurio, and then we have the Odeon Capital Group at the end of the month. So we'll be talking about the economy again. So I appreciate everybody being part of that. Again, you can download the W4CY app, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Ira Wolf. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Let's go to Apple, Spotify, Roku. We're everywhere. Again, thanks for being part of Googlization Nation. If you haven't joined yet, please do. It's free. Just go to googlizationnation.com. I want to extend a special thanks to both Gad and Chris for being here today, our listeners for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to us on your platform, if you listen to us, please do so. Leave a review. And until next time, don't let the shift your plan.
Thanks for watching Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Be sure to listen to the podcast and follow us on YouTube. This show was produced and edited by Hilton Productions.